It has been over a decade since Sean Connery starred as the role as James Bond, and in that time, Roger Moore has taken over the role for 5 films. However, Kevin McClory, the producer of Thunderball, has secured the rights to remake the film and paving the way for Sean's return. We invite you to join us and reunite with Bond expert Mr. Blair Ballard, as well as the newcomer Mr. Dave Brown, known as the Blades Club on Instagram. Blair, welcome back, mate. You never seem to leave.
Always a pleasure. I suppose as Timothy Dalton says to Marianne Dabo in The Living Daylights, it's always nice to be missed.
Dave, it's great to see you on board the Flying Saucer today, and I extend this warm welcome to you, and I'm excited about the positive energy you bring.
Thanks, Brian. Likewise, nice to see you again.
We are introduced to Lonnie Hall singing the title song over the opening scene, which was a training exercise for MI6. What do you think of how things were done, since we cannot use the traditional gun barrel or any Bond elements due to the rival Eon film Thunderball?
It's interesting because when I was a kid watching Never Say Never Again, I didn't know it was a non-Eon produced Bond film. So I probably picked up an awareness of that in my teens. And at the time, the absence of those kind of traditional Bond elements it bothered me as I watched it at that time. But we're now in a kind of post Daniel Craig era, and the last 20 years they've been kind of deconstructing all of those elements and those tropes anyway. So we didn't have a traditional gun barrel in Casino Royale, or in my opinion, quite frankly, any of the Daniel Craig Bond films. So they've been getting away at that so much that I'm kind of used to not seeing a gun barrel there anymore. So it's not as jarring to me rewatching it now post Daniel Craig as it was pre Daniel Craig.
Isn't there? There was I think sort of Ian LaFrenne and Dick Clement, who were kind of unofficial writers, obviously, for the script from Never Say Never Again. They kind of wrote the first sort of third of the film, and they'd written the whole sort of opening PTS sequence as a PTS sequence. And I think they were quite miffed when the actual film came out, and they got the theme song singing right over all of the hard work they put in for this really epic kind of opening scene. So I think they were slightly put out by. There is a version I think I've seen on YouTube where they've got a kind of Eon-ish kind of style version of it with, I think, from Russia with Love, the soundtrack, the pre-PTS from Russia with Love, the music, the track from that. And it kind of works, and it works really well. And it's a shame, obviously, they couldn't have woven. Obviously, they couldn't do the gun barrel, but I mean, the gun barrel, I suppose, sort of pops up later on when they're playing Domination. The kind of the way when they find the nuclear missile, they kind of manage to squeeze in a sort of gun barrel.
Maurice Binder,
yeah, that kind of style thing. So I think they managed to squeeze it in, but it's a real shame. It does detract from the feeling of it being a true Bond film. I agree.
The soundtrack actually has the original, I'm assuming it's the original music that Michel Legrand wrote for the opening. And it's kind of has like a fast kind of live and let die sound to it. So if you ever get your hands on the soundtrack, check out the first track on it. I'm pretty sure that was it.
Oh, cool. I mean, there were other people in the running to do the theme song. I know that Bonnie Tyler was approached to do it. Thank goodness she didn't get the gig, because I find it quite difficult to listen to sometimes. But I'm trying to think, there was somebody else quite famous who was up for doing the soundtrack, the theme song. Memory fails me as to who it was, but the song for me doesn't really do it for me. I don't know how you guys feel about the actual theme song itself. What do you think, Brian? What do you think?
I'm gonna be honest, it's like nails being scratched on a chalkboard to me. And to be frankly honest, I think Michael Legrand did a fantastic job with the score.
Mm-hmm.
But let alone the opening song is just nails on a chalkboard to me. And the fact that it reappears at the end of this movie, I should say, it just does not make sense to me at all.
I don't know. It doesn't. Yeah, I agree that it doesn't really work over the Commando Bond scene. And that scene could have been stronger with an actual score, I think. But I think it works for me. It's light, like the rest of the score. I like Legrand. I like his other films that he's done, like Umbrellas of Cherbourg and the classics that he did. And it, to me, the score is very like light and champagne like. So I don't mind it. Goes with the rest of the film.
I mean, it's very of its time as well. I think it beats. I mean, some of the other things. I mean, Octopussy's, all time high, for example. That's. I mean, it beats that hands down. There. I mean, it's just for me, it's very of its time. It's a shame they couldn't have had a kind of Morris Binder style kind of like title sequence, after the pre-titles bit, and a bit more in keeping with a Bond film. Maybe that's something that if they were going to kind of like redo it or recut it, that would be something to do. But as it is, I mean, the song itself is not too offensive, yeah, but I think that having them separated would have been a better feel for me.
Yeah, and touching base back on Michael Legrand, like I said, the rest of the score is fine. I think it truly fits, and especially the tracks, when he's in the casino, the spa. Overall, it's a great score, and it's sad that it doesn't get the recognition that it does, I should say.
I love the villa when he's walking through the villa just prior to the chase scene with Fatima Blush and the Renault 5 Turbo. That bit is like, is absolutely epic. I mean, he's tossing the apple and catches it behind it. That's just absolutely perfect Bond and perfect
Yeah.
Connery track, I think.
Casting was huge for this film, even though it was not official Bond film. It was quite successful at the box office, especially going up against Octopussy. Never Say Never Again grossed 160 million US, and Octopussy grossed 187.5 million US. Do you think Never Say Never Again was poorly casted, or why do you think Never Say Never Again didn't overtake Octopussy at the box office?
First off, obviously luring back Sean Connery was a huge coup for the producers. I think there are several reasons why it didn't perform quite as well as Octopussy. I mean, still, not a massive leap, a massive gap between the two of them in the sort of battle of the Bonds as it was being dubbed. I mean, at first, obviously, it's not an official Eon Productions Bond film, so it's not considered part of the official Bond kind of canon. So that distinction may have put off some die-hard fans who kind of prefer the continuity and the style of the official series over the unofficial Bond film. Also, you can obviously count Casino Royale, the 1967 version, in that kind of in that grouping as well. Although obviously as well, Never Say Never Again had a kind of significant budget, they didn't have access to sort of some of the hallmark elements that make a Bond film, produced by Eon. Obviously, stylistic elements. You've got, as we talked before, the gun barrel kind of motif at the beginning really kind of puts you in the mood for a Bond film. The Bond theme music as well. The sort of Monty Norman / John Barry Bond theme playing throughout the film at different moments isn't a feature of the film either. Also, obviously, you haven't got the recurring sort of characters. I mean, you've got a different M. You haven't got Q. You've got Algernon, obviously brilliantly played in the film, but Moneypenny is different as well. I think that the sort of familiarity and the continuity of the official Bond series is missing, and that kind of like takes away from the spectacle of it being a Bond film. Also, obviously, Sean Connery's been away for 12 years since his last official Bond film, obviously Diamonds Are Forever back in 1971. He's older, and while that's the whole point of the film, that he's a kind of like not retired, but he's kind of like he's now in training younger agents. He's not being used on active duty, and that's kind of the vibe of the film. The age difference between Connery and Moore might have been a factor. I mean, although Connery is, Moore was actually older, the audiences were used to Moore being the older Bond, and he kind of more suave, less kind of physically intense Bond, whereas Connery in this film is more subdued, and he's kind of got this more energetic performance. He's doing a bit more fighting, a bit more running, and so on, which might have kind of like jarred when people knew obviously that he's in his 50s. Eon also is a behemoth of a marketing and production sort of machine. which helped Octopussy obviously gain a stronger foothold in the marketplace. Both films obviously released in 1983. Obviously, we forgot there was also a third Bond on screen, well, on the small screen, in fact, with Lazenby, who was in one of the episodes of The Man from U.N.C.L.E. as JB. He had the Aston Martin. So, in fact, 1983 had three former Bonds on screen at the same time, which is quite fun. Regarding casting, I think that the casting is quite strong. I really think Klaus Maria Brandauer, he was a personal pick by Sean Connery, who said he was like the best actor around at the time, and I completely agree. I think he's a powerhouse of a performance from him in the film. I think he's absolutely brilliant, very unhinged, and totally credible. Even Kim Basinger was her first major film. She was very nervous about working on such a big project with an icon like Sean Connery and a great actor like Brandauer. But I think she was okay. She's not obviously as strong as Claudine Auger, her Domino, but she gives as good as she gets. I also kind of who else in the cast? I mean, obviously Fatima Blush. I mean, Barbara Carrera is just bonkers. She's brilliant. I think she was the only actress I think who was nominated for a Golden Globe. I don't think any other Bond girl in inverted commas has been nominated for one. So she gave a brilliant performance. I think my other half, Rachel, can't stand her for some reason. Doesn't like her performance, and obviously she's supposed to be flamboyant and absolutely off the hook. So I don't think you can fault the casting. I think the actual the way it was filmed, the way it was shot. Obviously, they had protracted problems. They had 5 crews working at the same time in different parts of the world. They had problems every day. They had to take the script to the law courts to get it signed off by Eon's lawyers to make sure it was okay. So the whole kind of machinery of the film was very clunky, and everything they had to tread very lightly on what they could do and what they couldn't do. So that dragged the performances down, I think, and the production down a bit as well. So I think despite all of those things, I think it did really, really well. But for me, I love both films. I love Octopussy because I've been to India, and I've been to East Germany as well when it was still part of the Soviet bloc. So I've got a soft spot for Octopussy as well. But for me, the Never Say Never Again is a real slice of 80s. It's a kind of like a comfortable kind of pair of pajamas or a pair of slippers you can wear. It's not trying to be the best Bond, but it's good fun, and you can see that Sean Connery is really, really enjoying himself. I think even though there were difficulties by the end, he had a lot of creative input as well, so he's got a lot invested in it in the film as well. So for me, yes, it's not absolutely archetypal classic Bond, but it's a guilty pleasure, as I've said before. I think it's great fun. So the main thing I think is it's not an Eon endorsed product, so that's why it potentially didn't have the backing of Eon and its machinery. So that's why the takings were slightly down. But I think it had a good stab at the box office though.
Its opening weekend was actually higher than Octopussy as well.
Oh, I did not know that. That's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
Sean is a pull, obviously. He's a massive pull, and people I'm sure eager to see if he'd still got the acting chops. I think he looks much better in this as well. I mean, compared to what he was so out of shape for Diamonds Are Forever, and was really obviously not happy to be there. I mean, after the debacle with You Only Live Twice, and the problems with the producers, and then being lured back for the big massive payout for Diamonds Are Forever, but looking way out of shape. He looks much better in this, I think.
Oh yeah.
That I think that people are just eager to see if he's still got the old magic, and I think he does. He's got that twinkle in his eye, so I don't think you can blame the actors' performances. So yeah, I think it's obviously having the bigger weekend, but I did not know that. That's amazing.
Like you said, it really is a time capsule of the 80s, and in so many ways, with like the music, the theme song, the actors, even like the way they did his makeup is very 80s. Like he kind of has like eyeshadow on, but he looks, I think he looks great in it. And he has a physicality that you haven't seen since pretty much Thunderball. Even it just kind of the way he feels comfortable in the role that you were not getting in You Only Live Twice and Diamonds Are Forever.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. He does look good. I mean, he's slimmed down. I think he did a lot of working out and running and stuff. He cut out the beard as well. So he was definitely looking much more sort of comfortable in his own skin. The way the suits were cut and everything else, which we'll come on to later on. I think he did, he looked much more comfortable. He had that twinkle back, which was great to see. And he wanted to be there. He thought, let's give it one more shot. And he liked the script. He worked a lot on it as well, with the writers and the producers. So he was very invested in it as a project and wanted it to succeed. So yeah, I think that comes across in the film as well.
This film is fantastic alone. It has a great standalone following now. And if you look at it, it's more of a cult-based film now. If you look at it now from when you go back to the 80s, it is a true time period of that era. But does Connery look better in this film than Diamonds Are Forever, let's say? Absolutely. And you got a great cast built around him. You got Kim Basinger, you got Barbara Carrera, you got Bernie Casey, the first black Felix Leiter, you got Max von Sydow, you got Pat Roach out of them all. You got, Irvin Kershner, who directed this film, who was, involved with what film, everybody? Empire Strikes Back, and that had a great reputation, and especially since it was Star Wars. So honestly, even like you just mentioned, Blair, training for this film, he was training with a young Steven Seagal at the time.
That's right. Broke his wrist, didn't he? Didn't Steven Seagal break
Right.
Connery's wrist?
That is correct. And I I have, like I said, I am legitimately developing a soft spot for this film, and I think it's mainly for the cult based, like I said.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that especially in the past year, I've found that there's been this big kind of resurgence for Never Say Never Again. Um, I know there was recently like the Bond community event there. I don't know if that kind of uh, has made more people rewatch it. I also think that it's about people kind of missing Bond. We've been without Bond for so long that people are more willing to go back and give this film another chance. And it has that Bond essence, like you said. I think Kirshner understands the character of Bond and the audience expectations of Bond. And he was kind of like Martin Campbell in that way. He just understood what the audience needed from a Bond film, and he did his best to try to put that on the screen. Um, I saw it in a 35 millimeter film in January, and that was a whole different experience as well. Like it didn't look as flat; it looked richer and deeper, and the sound was amazing. So that was kind of like rewatching it for the first time myself, and I kind of developed more of an appreciation of it then in January, seeing it in the movie theater.
I was the opposite, really. I used to live in the Middle East, and we used to get lots of pirate copies of films out there. And for some reason, Never Say Never Again came out as a pirate at the same time as A View to a Kill. So I thought those were the two films that were up against each other when I was younger. And I think that would be a fairer kind of like a comparison because for me, I mean, The View to a Kill is one of the weakest films in the franchise. In my opinion, I know it's a favorite for some guys in the community. But I think it kind of holds up slightly better against A View to a Kill than to Octopussy, which is I mean I've got a soft spot, but it's in my top sort of 10 films, Octopussy. So but I mean Never Say Never Again ahead, as I've mentioned. Yeah, I would put it sort of maybe lower middle range for my all my Bond films. It's got some great moments and some great performances. So yeah, it's definitely finding currying favor with a new audience as well, as you're saying, Dave.
Yeah, I remember my first you know, recollection of this film, and it was on 17 Days at 007 here in the US on TBS Superstation. And you know, I was told when I was, I think, 8 or 9 that this was a rival, a Thunderball, and I was like, at the time, like, there's no way that, there is such a thing. And, come to find out, it is an exact mirror image of Thunderball, and every element is pretty much Thunderball. And then I was like, wait, this does not make sense. And then, getting a VHS copy, later on, was like, okay, I need to look up more about this film. And I looked it up, and at the time, I was not, like I said, I was not sold on this film. I am not really enjoying it, but it is developing that soft spot like most people are these days. Blair, why do you think Never Say Never Again received some criticism? Do you think it's solely because it's not official, or is it just because it doesn't have that Eon punch like the official Thunderball has, even though this was solely produced by Kevin McClory as well?
Well, as we mentioned before, I think the main reason it doesn't get it gets the criticism is because there were kind of perceived production quality issues. Um, it also obviously suffers because there's a direct comparison to Thunderball, which is one of the all-time greats in my book. I know it does get its criticism for being too long and the underwater sequences a bit overdrawn. But I think it's got this sort of the fact that it's unofficial status. It's the stylistic and tonal differences from the Ewan films are quite obvious. The perceived production quality issues are obvious as well. But it's mainly, I think, the absence of the iconic Bond elements. We talked about this before, but having the gun barrel and having proper cue as opposed to just Algernon, and having our regular M pitching up. And the actual, there aren't as many big bombastic moments that you get in many of the Bond films. So I think those are the main reasons why it didn't get as much applause as Octopussy at the time, even though, as we've mentioned before, the actual difference in box office was about 20 million or so. So, quite a lot, but not as substantial as you might have thought. And as Dave mentioned, it had the bigger opening weekend. So it was doing some things right. And now, as we've mentioned, it's now getting the recognition I think it deserves, and rightly so.
I think, like Blair said, it's the perception of this non-official status. But movies are so different now in terms of like how comic book films have changed everything in terms of like actors coming back, characters coming back, rebooting franchises. So you can have like a Batman movie one year, and 2 years later there's a new Batman in a reboot. And I think that's kind of helping Never Say Never Again in a way as well, because when people are going back looking at it now, it's kind of cool to see Connery come back for another film. I think people would want to see that maybe with Brosnan or Dalton these days in some kind of way. So you get like that old man Bond that people have been thinking about, and you get to go and kind of get that with this film. And if you hadn't been watching it in your regular viewings, you probably haven't seen it for a long time. So it's quite refreshing to go back and look at it. But yeah, I think it originally just had that perception that it's not official, and that kind of hurt its reputation over the years, decades.
No, and I totally have to agree, like with both of you. You guys both make some fantastic points. I think a lot of Bond fans to this very day have always said, what if Pierce came back? What if Timothy came back? What if, George did a third? What if Roger had retired sooner than he did? You know, what if Connery had stayed on for, I should say, on Her Majesty's Secret Service? Those are all the biggest what ifs of the Bond franchise. I would love to hear like, what if that second Kevin McClory film was made? There was talk of, I think it was called Warhead 2000 AD or something like
Yeah.
that. And it never took off. And that was actually even supposed to have another former Bond as well. This was supposed to have, George come back, but he declined it. I think Timothy was asked as well, and I think he said no because he was not interested in doing these type of roles just yet. I think I think Roger was approached as well. Don't quote me on that, everybody, like I always say. But I know George was approached, but he hands down said no, he was done. Um, But yeah, what if the second film was made? What if that was successful? That go around. Would we have another one by McClory? So that would be three. You know, but to answer my own question, why does this receive criticism so much? I truly do agree. Like I said, it does not have the punch like the Eon films have. And that's where it truly does struggle. We don't have a gun barrel. We do not have, I should say, the MI6 regulars. Yeah, we do have an M. We have a money penny. But in all sense, we don't have a Q, like Blair had said. He's known as Algernon. But even though we all know he really is Q, we have the locations. That's fantastic right there. We see him back in the Bahamas. We there's a lot of great elements to this, but I really think it doesn't have the punch like the Eon films have.
Another thing is definitely helped Connery's career by doing this because prior to this, you had like Zardos, and not that there's anything wrong with Zardos, but um, he was doing like science fiction films, and I think this really kind of helped his career. A few years later, he got an Oscar for Untouchables. So, and then it's debatable if he came back for Bond one more time in The Rock, if you look at those theories too.
I was going to say, yeah, The Rock is, I think an unofficial sequel as well.
That's an excellent point you made there, Dave. It truly probably had saved Connery's career. And honestly, I know you probably do like Connery alone in Zardoz wearing that banana hammock, but don't shoot me on that one from the country. Uh, you know, but hey, I totally agree. It probably did. Untouchables is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. It had to be top 25. That was a fantastic cast. It was a fantastic score. And, let alone you make a great point. It saved Connery's career because look what he went on and do later on. Indiana Jones.
No, I think you've covered it. I think, absolutely. It gave him a new lease of life. What's the last film he had without a moustache or beard? But so that's a bit random. But no, but I think it did give him, and I think he aged. He looks so much better. He got better with age from this film onwards. Whereas Roger Moore obviously kind of started to look more of his age. I know he was 3 years older than Connery when they were doing the Battle of the Bonds, but Connery matured into his looks, and he was voted the sexiest man of the century. So his career, just took off again. He had a second lease of life after this. So I think this is definitely a key moment in the Connery story.
Connery, after Indiana Jones, he went on to make some decent movies. He made Finding Forrester, Entrapment, just to name a few, but he was not well known before he even took the role as Bond. If you really think about it, he got discovered in Darby O'Gill of the Little People. Right now, with this film being shot in the early 80s, how do you think this film was dressed compared to the rival film Thunderball in 1965?
Well, I mean, for me, obviously, fashion-wise, Thunderball is one of my favorite Bond films sartorially. It's just got a great look. The wardrobe is fantastic. Connery's wearing, got a great suits he wears. He's got a great the camp collar shirts, the tropical stuff he wears. Absolutely brilliant. But fashion-wise, I mean, trends in the early 80s, we were lucky because basically, I think that the 1980s had returned to the sort of classic styles of the earlier eras. It was just before it got crazy 80s. I mean, I know Fatima Blush was wearing some really outrageous outfits, and some of the pastel shades were a bit dodgy. But Connery had, it was kind of return in the early 80s to the sort of 60s style. It was cool again after being sort of the opposite of cool in the 1970s. So we were quite lucky with this film. So kind of the slouchy bagginess you get in the late 80s that we got obviously with Dalton's Bond, especially in License to Kill. that when they went full 80s hadn't quite kicked in yet. So we were quite lucky with that. So there wasn't much they had to change for Sean's look. And yeah, so in many ways, Connery's style was kind of related to, Never Say Never Again look was related to his 60s style. He wore English tailored bespoke suits, although he wasn't using Anthony Sinclair obviously at the time. He was replaced by Douglas Hayward, who also made Roger Moore suits at the time. So there was a connection to Connery's style in this film that he had with the Eon Bond series. Obviously, the shirt maker from his previous Bond films, Terminal Lanassa, made a return, which was great. I think the shirts were great. I was looking up your friend of mine, Matt Spazer's unmissableBondsuits.com references to this, and so many of the he was saying many of the stylistic elements from Connery's previous Bond films, like black notched lapel dinner suit, the grey herringbone suit, the light grey tropical suit, the ecru suit he wears when he arrives in Nassau, which is absolutely brilliant. He wears a blue blazer, the tweed jacket he wears when he arrives at Shrublands with the polo neck. I think that's a really good look as well when he arrives in the Bentley. I think he kind of rocks that one as well. He's got sort of cocktail cuff shirts, solid black tie, the grenadine tie, white swimming trunks, and wetsuits. The problem was that, although these are kind of staples that were returned and kind of like nods to his past Bond roles, they're just not as memorable this time round. I mean, I think, the clothes were really well tailored. I mean, Dougie Hayward is just brilliant. He's not too flashy. He's not so over stylized, but they don't stand out because I don't think, I think the scenes don't lend themselves to, there's a lot of gray as well. It's a bit meh. I mean, it's like 50 Shades of Grey. I'm no kind of joke, pun intended, but there are only for me two suits. I think the ecru suit he wears, I say, when he arrives in Nassau is brilliant, but you kind of remember that suit. It's really well cut and looks really great on him. But you remember it because it's the fun scene he has with Rowan Atkinson. You kind of like that suit. That scene stands out because of that fun banter they have together, I think. Also, the black dinner suit, it's not a wow dinner suit compared to the ones he wears in the sort of Terence Young kind of tenure, but it kind of plays second fiddle to the Game of Domination and the bike chase and the tango, I think. So the suit doesn't really kind of leap off the screen. I think the way it's filmed and shot as well doesn't really make the wardrobe selection really sing. So the lack of memorable outfits can't be attributed just to the clothes. I think the cinematography let them down. A lack of memorable, iconic moments compared to things like films like Goldfinger and Thunderball make the clothes just a bit flat. So I think, one of the other best suits I really like is the one when he's, in inverted commas, stalking Domino in south of France. When he's behind the tree before they get to the spa and he gets into the spa. It's only on screen very briefly, but he's wearing this kind of like a really sort of light grey suit. It's very similar to the ones he wears in Dr. No, Thunderball, and Diamonds Are Forever. But it fits really well, but you kind of gets lost. It's only on screen for about sort of a minute or so, and then it's gone. But the ecru suit that he wears in Nassau is really great, and I think it redeems the suit that he wore in Diamonds Are Forever with the pink tie. I mean, that was just terrible, terrible look. So this time he actually knocks it out of the park, I think, with the suit in Nassau. I really like, as I mentioned, the herringbone jacket he wears with the grey turtleneck, right briefly at the beginning, in the shrubland scene. It's a kind of classic country outfit. Kind of goes really well with the surroundings and the Bentley he's driving. But I think Connery, obviously, physically, he's far more convincing in the role at 53 than Roger was in Octopussy at the age 55. I think Connery looked pretty awful at 40 in Diamonds Are Forever, but some of the wardrobe, especially the casual choices in Never Say Never Again, are just a bit. I mean, the grey tracksuit he wears, in Shrublands does him no favors at all, I don't think. I mean, obviously, if he wore blue instead of grey, it would have been a bit more cool. And probably the less said about the blue dungarees, the better. Is that fair? But I know many of the clothes that Connery wears in this are, make Connery look older than he's supposed to be aged in the film, but he's not supposed to have completely lost his edge. Like some of the clothes make him look like he's kind of lost it. I mean, a blue suit would have helped Connery, infinitely more, I think, than all the greys we got, which kind of really age him in the film. He's got sort of, I mean, there's a bit of sort of dye in his hair to make him look less grey at the temples, but the clothes, for the most part, don't do any favors. There was a really cool cuff though that he wears in the film. It's like it's actually called a. Normally, in his previous kind of incarnations, he would wear a two-button cocktail cuff from Temple and Asset, but this was a unique kind of a button-down cocktail cuff, which is really cool, made by Temple and Asser. Let me see what else I've got down here. The blue blazer when he meets Algernon and riding in the south of France. That's another nod. He wears, blazers in the past. The dinner jacket, I mean, yeah, it doesn't do anything for me. I mean, in all, I think that it's quite an 80s kind of palette and quite an 80s look, and the suits and things, although they're well fitted by Dougie Hayward, I just don't think they really leap off the screen. The olive tactical gear he wears at the beginning, that's quite, quite interesting. That's the first time we really see kind of a Bond wearing tactical gear until we get to Dalton's tactical gear in the pre-title sequence for Living Daylights. It's kind of a bit more action. I mean, compared to Roger Moore and Octopussy, it really does show him as being a man of action. But he's wearing, I don't know if you noticed, he's wearing a sort of weird black fishnet shirt underneath. I mean, crikey, that was a bit of a dodgy choice. So, I mean, for me, the choices they made, I mean, compared to Thunderball, there's night and day. Thunderball just is he's one of the best dressed Bonds in that film. Whereas this, it passes. It's not full on 80s, but the clothes don't really kind of make a difference to Connery. I don't think for the most part. I don't know what you guys think.
I agree that the clothes and the sartorial elements are definitely stronger than Diamonds Are Forever, for sure. But yeah, like Thunderball is, it's like a perfect Bond film to me. And I think it is the best fashion, the best locations, the best looking Bond girls. So, Thunderball is right up there. So I don't have any problem with the fashion in Never Say Never Again. I think it looks good, and he looks, like I said, much better than some of his looks in Diamonds Are Forever. So I'm glad he got to go out looking much better than he did then.
I so have to agree with both of you. And, we got to thank, O.R. Brown in a sense for bringing back a resurgence of the iconic 60s look, for Bond. We got, remade of the camp shirts. We got remake of the swim wear, I totally agree. He came out looking stronger in Never Say Never Again than Diamonds Are Forever, for example. Um, Diamonds was not dressed well at all.
But it really it was the cut. I mean, obviously Sean Connery himself was in really bad shape, so but the clothes didn't really help him. And when he's wandering around and kind of in the all together around the hotel room, it's like whoa. But yeah, the ecru, the kind of the cream suit he wears in Diamonds, is just with the pink tie. It's just yeah, it's one of the worst combinations and cuts of any suit and in the franchise. Whereas, as I say, both the suits, the one he wears in south of France and the one he wears in Nassau, totally kind of like turn that on its head and fully redeem it.
I totally agree. Like again, he was, like I said, he was better dressed in this film. He truly fits his suits a lot better compared to Diamonds. You know, Thunderball is a whole different, era per se. But he looks like he truly is meant for the role here in Never Say Never Again.
Like Blair said, it's interesting that this is the first time you see Bond in tactical gear, which they did use in Living Daylights heavily in GoldenEye. So yeah, I didn't really think about that before.
Yeah, no, that's a great point as well. It's like, it's funny how, if you really think about it, three Bond films back to back per se, I'm not really counting, A View to Kill, but, we got, Never Say Never Again. There's tactical gear.
Yep.
Timothy Dalton comes onto the role, and he's wearing tactical gear on Gibraltar. And then later on,
Unless you count Goldfinger pre-title sequence, is that tactical gear? I don't know.
Well, I mean, that's he's wearing a dry suit, isn't he? He's kind of like I would say that's I wouldn't, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call that tactical gear. I think that's just like his kind of like his
Yeah.
insurgents. He's like sneak under the radar, and then he's ready takes it off and ready for evening wear.
I'm not gonna lie, that seagull decoy though in Goldfinger, it gets me going every time. I'm not gonna lie. Plus, I do like the dry suit though in Thunderball, that orange. Now, I think I could personally rock that. Blair, what do you think?
I absolutely kind of vermilion or tangerine, absolutely your dream.
And I know you can rock that suit from Spy, so we can be rocking the orange together, buddy.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good. Tango and tangerine. How's that?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sorry, Dave, you're left out on this one. Oh, you can wear the yellow Moonraker
I
jumpsuit.
can do the Canadian tuxedo, the dungarees. The dungarees.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'll do that.
First interaction with Largo is questionable when we first meet him in the casino. In Never Say Never Again, they play Baccarat, but in Never Say Never Again, they play a different game designed by Largo himself. It's called Domination. Should they have done this differently, do you think?
um, I think again, it plays into that 80s time capsule for me. So it did bother me when I was younger watching it. And I just thought it was such a absurd idea that they couldn't just play a traditional card game. But looking back at it now as a piece of the 80s, it kind of just fits and works with it. It has its issues for sure, but I like how it can show how tough Connery is as Bond with like the physical toughness without being in a fight. It's just him taking the pain. And that's an interesting concept and idea going in with an older Bond to show that he's still really tough and strong without having an actual fight scene. You know what I mean? So that was interesting. And like Blair mentioned before, it does have that sneaky Maurice Binder gun barrel in that one scene where it goes on Connery. So I thought that was cool too.
I mean, yes, it's of its time, and I know it kind of I suppose it was supposed to appeal to the young generation as well, the computer gaming generation, and they had to wheel in lots of computer games into the casino just to make it a bit more kind of like relevant. But I do love a good kind of confrontation over a card game, whether it's Baccarat or anything else. They could have played another game they haven't perhaps played before. So I do always find it funny in Thunderball when I mean Sean Connery's just too obvious when he goes, so it's your Spectre, the Spectre of my Spectre against your Spectre.
Yes, I thought I saw a spectre at your shoulder.
What do you mean?
The spectre of defeat. That your luck was due to change.
We'll soon find out.
Wink, wink. It's like, yeah, mate, that's not massively subtle, Sean. But no, I do. I mean, it's one of the tropes I know for a Bond film to have the casino scene and that the jousting over a card game or backgammon or whatever. So I kind of thought they might have found another way of doing it, which is a bit more traditional, a bit more classic. But as Dave said, it's of its time, and I don't mind it. It's quite it's quite well done for what it is. So I don't mind it. No.
I think Domination, I want to know who truly was the creator behind that, to be frankly honest, because I think it's a creative idea, let alone it has the trope of the gun barrel, that was probably definitely a nod to Maurice Bender saying, "Hey, we're using your idea, shots fired right now." And, you know, but alone, we see Bond walking past a roulette table. We see him walking past a baccarat table, And, we all know that's how Bond, defeats his villains early on is sitting at a baccarat table and, you know, uh, wiping them for all their money. And look what happens. Uh-oh. Well, guess what? That's one way to get into the, villain's lair. But this time around it was through domination, and they were playing for
Children, orphan children.
Really bizarre that he's got that, he's does stuff for orphan children. I mean, that's really nice. He's like, yeah, that's a good guy. Well,
Gives
it's a
back.
weird thing to attach to him being a bad guy, but he's a bit ruthless businessman. But actually, he looks after, the orphanages and, exactly. It's like, what? They could have made, I do love at the end of the game when he does that, and he goes,
Yeah.
I do love that. Good old guys.
well, it's like Nigel Small Fawcett says, Rowan Atkinson's character says,
Don't know his mother.
okay, like clearly he's a philanthropist after all,
Name of that casino is Casino Royale. You can see the name of it when Connery's walking in.
Absolutely. I was going to say, is that a gentle nod? I mean, it was a subtle Easter egg for us to find later on. But yeah, absolutely. I was reading that as well. And the guy who does the voice for the bouncer is also Robert Rietti, whatever, the guy who does the voice for Dofficelli, and also who's in the NATO room as well. The same guy. You there? This bomb. Yeah. So it's the same guy. He just gets a lot of work.
This bomb has a tiny gyroscope inside. Any lateral movement on your part, and you could be served in an egg cup. If you understand what's being explained to you, nod gently. Good boy. Stay.
I just
Okay.
love that scene, to be frankly honest,
Yeah.
just because it's like
It's hilarious.
so intimidating, but it's so funny at the same time. And the fact that, come to find out, oh, it was just a holder for his cigars after all.
I want that cigarette case. I mean, I don't smoke, but I mean, I quite like that case. I think it's really cool with the little buttons on the side. I don't know what they're supposed to be in real life, but it's really cool.
Wait, did you just say that you actually had that case in your
I'd
collection?
like to. I'd really like to have it.
Oh, okay. I was like,
Cool.
all the things that we've talked about over these past months, you're telling me that's the one thing you don't have, and I'm like,
Oh,
or you do
no.
have? I'm like, excuse me, like what?
I'd like to get that Union Jack pen.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite easy. I'm sure it's quite easy to get hold of. But
Yeah.
I'll see if I can dig one out for you.
And I think they reproduced the pen just recently, if I recall it.
No, I don't. I didn't know that, but I'll look into it for you guys, and I'll get some in the post for you.
Well, I would like that so much if you did.
Awesome.
Okay.
This was a messy situation for Irvin Kershner, the director, who we all know, like we've mentioned, directed Empire Strikes Back. Do you think he was the right choice for the film?
The only good memory was Sean. If he hadn't have been the Bond, I don't think the picture would have been finished.
I think that Kirshner gives a lot of credit to Connery for keeping the production on track and everything, but you really needed that like journeyman director like him that could take this, deal with all the production issues, the legal stuff in the background, and still focus on making the movie, making Connery happy, Brandauer like the kind of navigating the tensions between Brandauer and the other actors. And in that way, I think he is a good leader and a strong leader for this project. So I think it was a good pick. And with this track record, getting the director of Empire Strikes Back is a huge deal.
Yeah, I have to agree with Dave. I mean, I know that Richard Donner was in the running at one point, and Peter Hunt was already, sort of in the running as well, from just off the back of Honor Majesties as well. But I think he was the right choice. He although he said it was played with difficulty and it was a real slog, and they had like 5 crews running at the same time, and they had the legal issues every day, having to run things past Eon's lawyers, and all the other problems, the obstacles that Dave's mentioned. I think he did a stand-up job. I think with the tools he had, I mean, by the end, you could see that things were being rushed, and he wasn't happy with the end scenes, the underwater scenes, and the scenes in the Tears of Valor kind of sets. He wasn't happy with the way that went, and they kind of like were running out of time and money. But given all those factors, I think he did a stand-up job. And I'd be interested to see what Richard Donner's version would have been like, and also what Peter Hunt's version would have been like as well. Maybe in the future when we've got AI running everything and they can you can input. I'd like to see what Never Say Never Again would have been like with such a director and different actors playing different parts, which will inevitably happen in the next coming decades. But
Yeah.
as it stands, I think that he was the right choice at the time, and he did a good job.
Yeah, and Richard Donner's portrayal would have probably not been a bad one because, he did some iconic films later on. He went on to do The Goonies. He went on to go do Lethal Weapon. And, let alone, if you really think about it, The Goonies is technically a Bond film for kids in a sense because of the Bond Easter egg. And, we got good old Robert Davi playing one of the Fratellis.
What seems to be the problem?
Look, mister, I need a ride. My friends and I just had a run-in with these really disgusting people. You might have heard of them, the Fratellis. Well, we found their hideout. And could you please take me to the sheriff's station? I can describe all three of them.
Bimba dagli occhi vieni da Maria a questo
We got the Bond theme.
Yeah.
We got Steven Spielberg. This was also, produced on one of Warner Brothers' lots, if I recall. This, and then of course Lethal Weapon. What else can you ask for? Like, he had, action and adventure built into his blood, I should say. And like I said, it would have been interesting to see what could have been, right?
I think that would have been amazing.
What are some of your closing thoughts, and what would you guys bring from Thunderball and add to Never Say Never Again?
All right. I think it's kind of nice to see this Never Say Never Again renaissance, this resurgence of interest in it. Because I think, again, we're just lacking Bond news at the moment. So I'll take anything I can get. I'm going to go back to 54 Casino Royale and just do whatever I can to get that fix at the moment. So it gives me that. What I would have liked to see differently, or elements of Thunderball brought in, I think it would have been nice to see the Spectre meetings kind of fleshed out a bit more. Maybe give Max von Sydow a bigger role to work to play around with, and maybe have an assassination in the Spectre meeting, something like that. I believe someone told me that there was one filmed with the lady in the yellow jacket in the meeting there. So I would have liked to see that.
For me, I mean, I think you're absolutely right, Dave. I think the wardrobe, I think an emphasis on the classic wardrobe selection would have been great. If they could have brought across some of the more iconic Bond elements, maybe slightly stronger pacing, the underwater action. I know they had the same underwater cinematographer and coordinator they had for Thunderball, but I think that was a bit of a weak point for the film. The female characters were strong. The lavish set design would have been, even more lavish would have been great. But I think, mainly the wardrobe selection for Connery, it was very, as I say, 50 Shades of Grey, for the most part. And maybe if they could have fused the two together and had maybe proper Q, maybe sort of the proper M, and the more of the Bond tropes, if they could have fused them together, and sort of worked something out with Eon and actually made that film, that would have been absolutely incredible. But as it stands, I think it was a pretty solid effort. And I think it's one of my guilty pleasures, something I really do enjoy. I think Thunderball is the better film. There's no real argument there, but it's a guilty pleasure. It's something breezy, as I said, it's something comfortable for me. It's like a pair of slippers, as I say, takes me back to my 80s teenage years. And I said before, it ranks for me, higher than certain Eon canon films. It's, thanks to Connery being a bit more relaxed, obviously enjoying himself, great performances from Brandau and Carrera. So all in all, I think it ranks, sort of quite highly for me, and it's a comfortable film. It's comfort food.
I'm gonna reverse my own question here. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm just kidding. I would like to bring, like the Baccarat, gambling over. Like I said earlier, I think that truly is the one way that truly Bond films really do succeed. We see, them defeating the villain at the table at first, and it's their way into the villain's lair. Unfortunately, we did not get anything like that. That was like truly kind of on the intensify level, because we hear, like I said, he's playing for orphan children, and here later on, oh, you're invited for lunch on a cruise, the flying saucer, like, okay. And then he has to relay a message back to MI6, and we see Bond kissing Domino to provoke a reaction from Largo. Now that was fantastically well done. I have nothing bad to say about that. But let alone, the one thing that this film does lack, it is the underwater sequences. And that is kind of surprising because, like Blair said, they were both shot by the same underwater director in Rico Browning. There's a lot of Bond alumni actually in Never Say Never Again as well, if you haven't paid attention. I know the average Bond film or Bond fan, my bad, doesn't, pick up on that. It's like they might be like, wait, is that one gal or one actor in the film? And it's like, but yes, there is several Bond alumni in Never Say Never Again, and that's fantastic as well. But I truly think the card playing, defeating the Bond villain and, getting into the lair that way for the first time is truly what makes it best. Plus, I think Palmyra is better in Thunderball compared to Never Say Never Again.
Well, who doesn't want to have their own shark pool? I mean, it's just like that's ultimate Bond villain. I mean, only topped by Austin Powers' sharks with freaking laser beams. It would have been great. But yeah, I mean, it's a classic Bond. Bond megalomaniac having your own shark pool is just absolutely iconic. So yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I think a lot of people point out what it doesn't have. Like, doesn't have the gun barrel, the theme song, pre-title, but if you look at what Eon has, I don't know if they've taken it purposefully or if it's just coincidence, but there's been a lot of callback to Never Say Never Again in Eon films in the future. Like I said with the characters, Barbara Carrera is kind of like the prototype of On a Top, and then you got Brandauer, Dominic Green. You have like the laser watch from GoldenEye and Never Say Never Again. Even like you mentioned the crew, they used a lot of the same crew. So we have Wendy Leach as the kidnapped woman in the training thing at the beginning. And that whole story, that like the backstory there, like the millionaire's daughter kidnapped, brainwashed, that's pretty much the plot of The World Is Not Enough that they just took from that. So, and I'm sure there's other ones but those ones come off the top of my mind. And it's interesting to kind of see that. Even like the Casino Royale opening as a cold open, you can't say it's the first film to do that with Never Say Never Again. So
also the gag in Q's lab when echoed in GoldenEye when he's like picking up the nose spray and he goes, "What is this?" And it's like same as the sandwich in GoldenEye.
Right.
Don't eat my lunch. That's
right.
The same So they do obviously pay attention and they nip things. Yeah.
And it's the first Bond film with a motorcycle chase as well. It's very well done. I think that scene is just as good as any Eon action scene from that era.
I gotta agree. I think, like I said, you guys have hit some fantastic elements. Any final words before we sign off?
Just likewise, Brian, thanks for having me. I love talking Bond with you, so anytime. Thank you. And nice to meet you, Blair.
Oh, it's really been an absolute pleasure, Dave. Nice to meet you too, and hopefully we can see you in the future and chat again. But Brian, thanks for having us. It's always a pleasure, never a chore, and any excuse to talk Bond is a good excuse. It's always a pleasure to be on your show.
Well, I'm gonna say one thing about both of you, and honestly, don't get too emotional. But Dave, like, you know, we haven't known each other that long, and it's been truly a great time for us talking. And you know, I have never enjoyed someone as knowledgeable as yourself. You definitely have came a long way since we first started talking, so I can't thank you enough.
Thanks, man.
Blair, you know, we have gone back, you know, since the pandemic. We've known each other for a long time now, it feels like. But, you know, we finally started talking Bond just in the last few months, and, you know, we've known each other on a personal standpoint and a Bond standpoint. And honestly, I can't thank you enough for, you know, taking the time. You know, you've gone back to work, which congratulations on. You know, you raise a family. You do it all. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your schedule now and making this all work.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome. It's always a pleasure, as I say. And yeah, life's changed a bit for me. I mean, after 17 years of being a stay-at-home dad, I've actually, started a responsible job once again. But it's working with kids, which is absolutely exhausting and exhilarating and rewarding, and at the same time. So, but it's nice to have a bit of a release and do a kind of Bond stuff as well. So chatting with you guys has been an absolute pleasure. So it's really lovely. Thanks for having me, and nice to meet you, Dave, as well.
Thank you, likewise.
So for Pacific Coast Bond, this is Brian Levesque. We will sign off until next time.